Raise the frequency, happy to see me. Are you ready for a holistic view? Raise the frequency, happy to see me. Are you ready for a holistic view? Are you ready for the holistic view?
All creatures, the low and the high, are one with nature. If we have the wisdom to learn, all may teach us their virtues. Between the fragile beauty of the praying mantis and the fire and passion of the winged dragons, there is only harmony.
Nature is our God, we surviving over here. Natural, we keep it live over here.
You start to realize what government is doing is claiming a hegemony over nature. And so when I come into this equation saying, this is what nature is, this is what is natural, I encourage the individual to learn about nature just as much as me. I'm not claiming to have the answers. Government is. The people who claim to be man-made authority is. Everything that has to do with Naturosophy and this philosophy of nature is dissecting man-made authority versus natural authority. Because if you think that you need to justify more man-made creations for your own happiness, what you're justifying is more man-made creations for natural creation.
Do not tamper with natural law. We defend it. Defend it. Defend it. Defend it.
Welcome and bonjour. I'm so pleased and grateful and honored to have Cory Endrulat, a man of monumental work these days. I can't even catch up with what he's been doing over the past year, 2 years. As soon as he's been on the radar, he's written books, he's got several websites, and most currently, we are in the process of a Freedom Summit, the end of slavery. And there's 50 speakers and counting, including the Wizard Factory, and some really big names that I won't mention because spoiler alerts. Anyways, Cory, without further ado, yeah, so impressive what you've had. I'm very thankful to be in contact with you in many ways and doing a future project together. Well, currently, but please tell us what's on your mind and what did I leave out as far as what folks should know about you and all that good stuff.
No, you didn't leave anything out. I'm just a fellow human being just like you, man. We're in this for the truth together. You good?
Yeah, sorry. I had my speakers turned off. I didn't hear you, but
okay.
Everyone else did, and that's what matters. Yeah, so Cory, I'm really pleased to speak about some things that have been on your mind recently, and just the fact that you've been amidst the whole end of freedoms, the end of slavery summit. That everyone's pretty much inquiring more about that subject, but speaking with you even like a month or two ago, you've been looking to just express what's on your mind and in your heart as far as getting back with nature and emphasizing and expanding more upon natural law, whatever, universal law, cosmic law, law of causality, spiritual law, karmic law, all these phrases. And I think you had some directions as far as like simplifying some things or
Yeah, so I mean, there's a lot of words you just mentioned that are all basically the same thing. Because everybody, when they usually talk about natural law, they say, well, it's God's law, or no, it's karma. Oh no, it's golden rule. Oh no, that's just cause and effect. And then they're like, oh well, it's the Hermetic principles, and then it's this and that. But I would like to simplify it. If we say that all of nature operates by laws, then by definition, natural law is just nature, because nature operates entirely by law. And if nothing escapes the law, then it's simply nature. And, if we say it's natural, and if we were to ask ourselves, like, what's the most natural thing on this earth, it would have to be nature itself, because that's what natural is meaning. It means of nature. So we have to break things down a little bit more than what we have been perceiving in the world when we use this term natural law. I'm afraid, because when we use the word natural, we do this on a day-to-day basis with right and wrong. We do this with honesty and dishonesty, truthful and untruthful, in reality and out of reality. These words all correlate very similar to one another as well. Right. So,
Yeah.
and you'll see across every single culture, they all have their own ways of saying the same thing. So, for when people say, well, a right is something that doesn't cause harm, I say that's not the correct definition. And it's going to surprise a lot of people for me to say that. But truth is constantly a process of revision and constantly a process of becoming better. Knowledge in general, I mean, you have to increase your knowledge, and that's how it becomes knowledge. I mean, how it goes from a belief to knowledge is something where it's like, oh, I know this now. I don't have to believe it anymore. And for our knowledge to be considered the truth, it's like, who's to say you have the truth? You know, we're just beings within the truth. That doesn't mean truth isn't objective just because we only get bits and pieces, or just because we're trying to improve every step of the way. See, there's a lot of disclaimers we have to make. Like, okay, just because it's not static, because things are constantly changing in nature, does not mean there isn't a timeless or objective universal blueprint that we have to understand. It doesn't mean we just abandon that goal or that end as to seeking as to, wow, okay, we can understand this, we can ground our principles. Doesn't mean we just say it's all relativistic just because we're constantly in the search and constantly trying to improve. But if you don't, so these are just some of the disclaimers, right, that we have to make on this process. So what I'm saying is, as part of our evolution, we're going to change our terminology boundlessly. We have to. And as we increase our consciousness and as we find out there's different ways of saying things. And this perspective that I share about ending slavery is not limited to just natural law. It's not limited to, you know, talking about statism. It's not limited to talking about, I don't know, economics, capitalism. It's not limited to any one thing, because it has to do with a destiny, which would encompass many things. If we're saying we're meant to be free, we're saying basically we're naturally free. And so what does it mean then to say nature and to say what is natural? Well, what would you say, Derek?
Well, I wouldn't say anything of the sort of all the marketing that we see, you know, oh, all natural products and whatever you're going to find in, you know, the toxic aisles in the grocery store and all that. But I love what you had to say about that right there. And you kind of remind me of, you know, what Manly P. Hall speaks about in the whole, you know, the eternal unfoldment of life and everything. And like things are just, yeah, there's always the ebb and flow. You know, we're following the principles of natural law and how you say things are, you know, not necessarily always static, and that's vibration for you and on all that. But as far as natural, it's organic. It's just, you know, what is, or the isness, if you will, as well. Just like nothing that hasn't really been tainted, adulterated, inverted, perverted, all that stuff, you know, like these non-man-made things, you know. But then we got to ask ourselves, including the extraterrestrials, well, what about, you know, the terrestrial, the alien-made things, if you will, or, you know, this and that. I mean, like, you can fall into those types of things. We're not going to get all complicated and delve into these diversions of whatever the fuck. But yeah, like you're saying, just like everything, we have to take the whole full spectrum of, you know, everything that, you know, when all things are considered, what is there, you know, like in the end, like, right? So
Right. What is there beyond all the veils? What is there beyond humanity? And this is the question, as to like, where is our time and place? Time and place is a core concept that I teach within the philosophy I made based on nature, which I call Naturosophy. Okay, which means the knowledge of nature. You call it the philosophy of nature, whatever you want to call it. Time and place says, well, do we know our time and place, and do we know this time and place of this class, the time and place of everything around us? See, somebody can look at us right now, and obviously we're surrounded in the world of man-made things, right? The man-made does not insinuate that it's unnatural, but clearly it's not as natural as those things that have always existed, that have always been here. So I usually define the natural as that of which has always existed. This keeps it much simpler for a lot of people, because all the definitions you provided are probably the answer I'm going to get from everybody, because to some extent, people intuitively know what is natural. Isn't that interesting? And that right there is the key to understanding rights, understanding ownership, understanding everything that has to do with a destiny or a purpose for humanity. So, when we say we have rights, we're born with certain rights. What we're saying is it's something that has always been with us. The same way we would look at nature and say, well, what is natural is what has always been there. So I equate rights to being sort of these natural natures. And when you violate a right, you're violating a nature because that's what you're doing. If you're saying, I get to hurt you, I get to violate your ownership or who you are, I'm violating what you have been ever since you were born. And this is why right when people are born into this world, they have to be injected with a bunch of things and immediately indoctrinated into the man-made world, because it brings them into this unnatural state almost immediately. But they still, beyond that, that process of birth was something that nature gave them, not something that man created. People say, well, technically every man is man-made because, it took two human beings to make a person. Like, yeah, you can make that case, but that process is of nature because that has always existed. You understand? What man creates, these things that are around us are temporary. They're things that have not always existed. And we tend to consider some things that have long lasted that humanity has created as great. We'll say our great-grandfather or this great pyramid of Giza, great representing this long length of time. You're going to see a lot of correlations here, okay? And a lot of things that have not been mentioned through the course of history that I'm finding out through this philosophy, which anybody can find out through this philosophy. I am not the holder of the knowledge of nature. Nor are you. We are both partaking in that knowledge seeking.
Yeah, I like to call it the science of life.
Yes, it is, right. And life is another word for nature, is another word for truth, is another word for reality. These are, again, all related.
And what does the word nature mean, right?
Yeah,
neter, spirits, all that good stuff. It all goes back to the one.
Yeah, if what's natural is that of nature, and it's that of which has always existed, then nature is what has always existed. It's the most natural because it is nature, So when we're looking at speech, when we're looking at our evolution, our conscience, there has been many years where people suppress their conscience for following authorities for others and not using aspects of their nature, or maybe using other parts like their fear and their instincts. We can say, oh, well, that's all natural. They're following what they're doing. But have we found our time and place? If we have a conscience, the ability to decide right and wrong, and we're not using that at all, and we're completely just on the side of fear and instinct, are we really aligned to who we are supposed to be? We see where that has led us. It led us to chaos. So clearly, nature has built within us all the capacity to do a bunch of things, whether it's creating man-made things or creating chaos or order into the world. Nature is not inherently good then. It simply exists, right? Just as truth simply exists. But when we learn from nature, as we are as human beings with the capacity of reason and the capacity of our brains that we have, then we can understand what is natural. So, if natural law is just nature, natural moral law, when you add morality into the equation, is when you add humans to the equation. Because humans are the ones who have conscience and reasoning powers, especially that a lot of other animals we say do not, which I'm not to say I really don't know what these animals have. I don't want to underestimate their power, but I do know as human beings, we created religions, we create governments, we create all these complex systems that these other animals are not doing, and if anything, if anyone's going to be more aligned to nature, it's them, because they're in tune with themselves rather than us who's always projecting and looking elsewhere. But that's a whole different story. That's why in my 10-hour Naturosophy presentation, I go into Mark Twain and his essay on how man is the lowest animal, not the highest animal. The reason why we go into that is for a sense of humility, so that we're always looking up to nature as our authority. If you have nature as your authority, by definition, you would not have government in charge of your life. You would recognize there's something higher than that, which encompasses every human being, which is not only above human beings, but is beyond human beings, has always existed. It's like a government claiming, well, you can't go on this beach because we said so. It's like, I'm sorry, Mr. Government, whoever you are, the set of buildings or people who wear certain, uniforms. It's all unnatural, by the way. It's all just self-presumed. They're going to say, well, you can't go on this beach, and you're going to be like, I'm sorry, but this beach has been here forever. Like, who are you to say that I can't go on this beach? And this beach is like here for everybody. Who's to say that you have to decide for everyone else how, if we should go on this beach? You start to realize what government is doing is claiming a hegemony over nature. And so when I come into this equation saying this is what nature is, this is what is natural, I encourage the individual to learn about nature just as much as me. I'm not claiming to have the answers. Government is. The people who claim to be man-made authority is. Everything that has to do with Naturosophy and this philosophy of nature is dissecting man-made authority versus natural authority. Because if you think that you need to justify more man-made creations for your own happiness, what you're justifying is more man-made creations for natural creation. And once you start to realize that doesn't make sense, because what's going to really make you happy is being happy, having the natural with you, family, friends, food, health, all these things are natural things. If you attach yourself to material things and to the, what people call the fleshly desires and all these other things of the man-made world that people want people consumed in as consumers and materials and all this stuff, then you're going to detach yourself from nature. This is what it means. And every single culture has basically said this, and through natural law and through morality, it led that way too. So for us to limit morality to just actions is very, very limited, because clearly our actions give us conditions, and those conditions are going to consist of so many things. Our actions are going to have to deal with material things and things in existence. So we have to evaluate everything, not just our actions, but who we are on an individual level. If we aren't even able to act, that concerns our nature. And so
that goes back to the first one state of mind before the action, right? Like what's going on with that first cosmic law principle.
I'm sorry, but yeah, we're getting to the point where it's like we can't even understand who we are, let alone what we can do or anything. We can't even do it. So like our nature is being compromised to the deepest essence. And so for us to be talking about morality, it would have to extend to almost every part of human function. Because morality is saying, well, we just want people to function just as much as we want to function. And we want them to function well, generally speaking. So nature is like, nature is there to function. Otherwise, it wouldn't exist. It wouldn't persist. So, you have the nature of your body. Well, it's no longer a body if it doesn't exist. So the whole point of learning from nature, or the whole point of us using our minds in general, is to learn how we better our existence. That's the whole point of knowledge, the whole point of philosophy. And philosophy has delved into this course of materialism and atheism over the age, where they lost touch with a lot of the original philosophies that were saying, here's your connection to nature. Here's your connection to purpose, to destiny, to meaning, to value. But the scientism and the people who brought in this new wave of philosophy, they don't want to look at that. They think you can't prove that, because they're not applying all aspects of their nature. They're saying, well, okay, let's just use our brain, and maybe our left brain and not our right brain. Let's
too imbalance. Yep.
It's imbalance, because why do we have the ability to have empathy? Are we just to rule that out because it's too subjective, it's just an individual's feelings? Like, hello, our feelings, our subjectivity is very important. This is another thing. While we talk about objective morality, the subjectivity in our nature is not something to just be disregarded. The fact that we have different personalities, different opinions, is a beautiful thing. The whole point is that I don't decide for you what your opinions are and dictate upon you, because that would make me man-made authority.
Boom.
I would be claiming to be nature itself, which I'm not. If we're both connected to the same source and in the same reality, which we are, then nature is our authority, and it can't be any other authority. I can guide you and help you in that process of that authority, but I'd still have to recognize that authority. Otherwise, it's going to beat down on me. One way or another, I will face the consequences of trying to be something I'm not. And that's where dishonesty and deceit comes in. I wrote a book recently, Nature's Radical Honesty, a practical application of Naturosophy. It's basically less than 50 pages, and it's a small book. It's not even a full-size, like regular, 6x9 book. Because I want people to realize that you can break everything down to honesty. just as much as you can to all these other terms, nature, reality, truth, or what is even healthy. Health you can relate, okay? Because health is a condition. So if I say a food is healthy, it's like saying a food is natural and it supports my nature. Well, a food is healthy, it supports my health. If you're assuming that your nature is something that needs to be maintained, you're assuming it is health that needs to be maintained. Health in nature is just as synonymous as truth and reality. And so I have a chart in my 10-hour presentation where I also show all these terms being on the same way. You'll see there's hundreds of terms to mean the same thing in our dictionary. And for us to use and say, well, arthritis doesn't cause harm, it's like you realize there's like a billion other ways to say that. And the Tao Te Ching was saying it thousands and thousands and thousands of years ago, even before the Bible. So it's like, and what the Tao Te Ching represents, right, is the way of nature. That's what it stands for. And what does it recommend people to do? Nothing. Not that they don't put anything into the world or create nothing new. It's recommending that they understand the authority that's already there, so that way they're not trying to replace what is already there, trying to be the authority. And that's why they say the best leaders are the ones who are actually below, not above. Like the ones you don't even see. It's not even a government that you've ever seen before. This is literally what it says in this text. And this is way before most texts nowadays, most occult texts as well. Right, so it's this wisdom goes back. I mean, you can find even Native American cultures and all this, and you're going to say, well, they worship this, they worship that. It doesn't matter. These are all just different encapsulations of how they perceive nature. They were still seeing nature as authority. That's the key point. And us as human beings in the modern day and age, we simply, I'm claiming, have grown detached from that connection that these people had. And we wouldn't even understand because we're so enwrapped in all of this that we can't even get close to that, let alone beyond that to see even more. And this is just something where people can go outside in nature and find out for themselves and do some reflection techniques and look around you and say, do you really know everything? Look around you, look at this night sky and tell yourself, do you know everything? Because I guarantee you're going to be like, what? That's mysterious. That's imaginative. So it's the fact that I'm saying to people, don't lie and always be honest. It's like you don't need to lie to imagine. People are saying, well, we got to think of unicorns and we got to think of rainbows and all these things that Disney and all these companies put in our heads to imagine. You don't need to lie to yourself in order to imagine. But in our world, we have justified lying and man-made creations for everything that we want that is natural. So if you want a relationship, you have to go online through Tinder or through some web service. If you want a relationship, you have to make someone happy and give them a bunch of gifts and give them a bunch of man-made things. You have to have enough money. You have to have a good job. You have to look good. You have to have the great personality. But never once question if you're honestly meant for that person, in the natural reality, if you guys are suited for each other based upon your experiences, like looking beyond the veils of the temporary man-made things that we see are so illusory. So that is what I'm asking for, is looking at the world that has always existed versus the world which has not always existed. And so that is the difference between the natural and the unnatural, right? Very briefly. But there's more to it. The natural has to do with naturalizing. Okay, naturalize means to make natural. So if you were questioning, well, we're in an unnatural world or a world of many material things, Cory, you're claiming, but material things and man-made things are not always unnatural. What makes material things unnatural? Well, their existence, first of all, is not as permanent, has always existed as nature itself. So that already makes it less natural. But its effects are different from its existence. Just because something naturally occurs does not mean it naturally exists, and just because something naturally exists does not mean it's natural to use. So let's say a plant is poisonous in the wild, and I don't realize that it's poisonous, and I touch the plant. I now learn my lesson. I should not do that. And if I warn people of others, I'm basically sharing with them the knowledge of nature. And that's basically Naturosophy in a nutshell. And so you're recognizing this thing is natural to exist because clearly it's been here. I don't know maybe why it exists. Maybe it's not supposed to be here. Maybe this plant is here because it's trying to control the ecosystem, but it's probably there for a reason because everything in nature happens for a reason. Okay, so this plant is there to do something, probably some sort of ecosystem function. And that's why, humans are like, oh, it's an evil plant, we should get rid of it. And then they end up causing more problems because they don't understand what the plant is there doing.
Yeah, and like it might be poisonous for us, but it might not be poisonous for other, animals or whatever that might,
Right,
benefit from it in whatever
exactly.
way. And real quick, I mean, like,
Sure.
just for people listening to understand, like, because I know you and I know where you're coming from, but Corey is not like demonizing material, things that man has made. Like we've created so many wonderful things that have helped us. That's
Hmm.
just what technology is. Even though our essence and our magic is like the true technology behind it all, right?
Yes.
But and what you mentioned, like I wanted to key in on that word because like you bam, 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 like Machine Gun Kelly on so many great points, man. I love it. But just to rewind real quick for people to you know understand that yes, it becomes a problem. All these man-made things, it's not good or bad, but how we use it can be good or bad, and it becomes bad when we become too attached to. We have too much of that ego attachment, whatever you want to call it, which like you said, kind of detaches us from nature. So there's that attachment and detachment kind of dynamic going on with that. So yeah,
Yeah.
really great points, man. Keep it up. You're
So
good to go.
here's the deal, right? We have natures individually, and then there's the nature of the world. This is a relationship. It's one that it's if somebody has a very limited worldview and they're approaching this interview, they're going to come out with a bunch of assumptions if they have not studied the nature of everything. And that's what I'm asking people to do, because if you want to learn about your world, learn about everything in the world. Don't leave a single part out. If there's a single part of the body, it's got to function. There's not there for no reason. It's like even the most useless parts in the body, people will try to say, well, this part is more useful. It's like, are you kidding me? They're all useful. Otherwise, it wouldn't be there. The fact that we create man-made things or create wrong actions, as you know, we learn from those wrong actions to do what is right. Nature teaches us through what we do. And the man-made things I'm definitely not knocking, because as we just said with the poisonous plant in nature, which is, that's a more natural example too. It's like we learn that just because it's natural to exist does not mean it's natural to use. So if it comes to a man-made thing like technology, we have to recognize and say this is not reality, it's an illusion. If we understand that, we already understand the authority behind it, which is nature. Already, that's a lot, because most people are going to consume this and think this is reality now. And they're going to think that basically we should accept it. And because we should accept it, now we permiss everything that comes of it. And this is how we become accepting of lies, is we start to take the premises of a lie and think it's natural. We think something that is unnatural is essentially natural, and therefore we justify everything that is unnatural afterwards. So may you say you have a disease that you're not supposed to have, or we even will call it straight up natural death versus unnatural death, and democide being the number one cause of unnatural death. Funny enough. And so if you were to look at that, you say, well, that's not right, because obviously that's not how people should die. They shouldn't be dying like this. Then you'd recognize, well, okay, how do we fix this problem? Some people might say, okay, you have a disease that you shouldn't have, so I guess you should use this man-made drug, because this man-made drug is probably going to help this disease. But if that disease shouldn't exist in the first place, what caused it, and what makes you think that it's justified using a lie to help another lie? And this is another scenario. It's like, oh, I get pulled over by cops. Do I tell them the truth and go to jail, or do I lie to them so I don't go to jail? Okay, again, a lie justifying a lie. Why is there a cop pulling you over in the first place? They're the lie, so they're trying to justify. So basically, you feel like lying is justified in that scenario because of who they are, but you still recognize it as lying. You still recognize it as being false. You intuitively know still that the drug that you're taking is not something that is natural, but you don't see any other possibilities. You don't see any other potential usage. And so it all comes down to knowledge. Socrates said the only good is knowledge, the only evil is ignorance. If we expand our definitions of right and wrong to that, that is a definition that applies to everything. Because what is keeping people in ignorance? What is keeping people with knowledge? It's all about expansion versus limitation. It's all about looking at the infinity, or what has always existed, right? So that's nature. So, and people will also define nature, people I talk to, as this infinite, this thing that just constantly, is there. And so, um,
Eternal.
right, right. And again, they call natural law eternal law for that reason. So none of this is coincidence. But to go back now to our effects and our usages, when I use the word naturalize, it means to create natural, to make natural. Okay, not to create it, obviously, to make natural. So if I say denaturalize, it means to make unnatural, right? Now, if I say you brought up another one, naturality, right? Another term that's similar to that, right? And there's other terms to represent that as well. Okay. So, what does it mean, though, if we were to make natural? So, it'd have to be something that is becoming in accord with something that has always existed. Okay, so what is our definition of right and wrong in natural law, right? We know a wrong is something that steals, something that creates a victim, something that causes harm, something that creates violence. So, my definitions are simple with this as well. Something that naturalizes is something that supports or gives to the natural, and something that does not naturalize, something that denatures is a good word you can use, or denaturalizes, is something that steals from, okay, or disregards, lacks the natural. And so this is all the concept of, are we learning the lessons of loss in this world? If I lose the ability to speak to you, if I lose the ability to walk, if I lose the ability to see, if I lose the ability to breathe, if I lose the ability to live my life simply as is, as nature gave me, I am becoming denatured. We have to recognize that. We can't excuse that. Oh, this person lost a leg. I guess we can give them a mechanical leg. That's not the solution. That's the treatment. That's not the prevention. And nowadays, we look in the medical system, it's all about treatment, not about prevention. If you want to get to prevention, you get to the root cause. Why is this person losing their leg? Oh, I have a mask on, I can't breathe. Okay, it's like you're basically lessening your natural function of breathing. This is obvious. And so when we learn the lessons of loss, oh, shoot, I lost my house, I lost my huge material thing. It's like, shoot, I just lost something, an attachment that I had, which I probably shouldn't have had, which is why I'm now my whole nature is being affected. Because I attached my nature, my natural, self to this man-made world. So
Yeah, the sentimental value must have been through the roof, eh?
yeah, so this is obviously takes many different ways of looking at it, but if you can understand what is natural is that which has always existed, and it's something that supports and gives to the natural. Isn't that funny how that works? The natural supports the natural. The denatured, the unnatural, supports the unnatural. This is all the matter of manifestation. Some people will call natural law the laws of manifestation. For this reason, if you do something bad, you're going to expect something worse. So it's all about the matter of justification. Are you justifying lies, or are you allowing and simply embracing what is nature so it can do its own work? Just as the body heals itself when you let it heal itself, when you know how to allow it to heal itself, past the illusions, past all the things that are blocking its ability. And that's why we see a lot of man-made drugs are just blocking or suppressing the natural functions. And they don't ever create anything new. What's unnatural, if you notice, unnatural. It's like saying unreal, untruth. It doesn't make a new word. It only takes from the original word and twists it simply by the word usage. And so it's right in front of our faces. You'll look at all these terms that equate to what is wrong or what is unnatural, and you'll see it's like, wait, they're all just inversions of the natural, twisted versions. And so all you're doing is recognizing, okay, the unnatural is something that, again, has not always existed. It could only take from what has existed. So man is taking from resources and building new things, but man has not really created anything new, because everything around us is still from the natural world. This is why the man-made in technology is perfectly natural. People will say, oh, this is natural, because otherwise it wouldn't exist. You're right. But guess what? Guess what? You still malformed it from its original form. And again, what is natural exists is not what's natural to occur, what's not natural to use. So 3 separate scenarios you'd have to look at. So, okay, I got it naturally occurred. I got this disease. It's like, okay, but was it actually natural to occur? Like, that's a separate question. So although it
Yeah.
naturally occurred with this thing, what caused it to naturally occur? Is it a natural or unnatural thing that caused it? Because you can argue and say, well, with government, we naturally get democide. With government, we naturally get the exemption to basic everyday morality. Sure, naturally it occurs, but it doesn't mean it's natural to exist.
Yeah, and another example I was thinking about was just like just kind of being disharmony with oneself. Just let's say you're just out on a walk or running around and you kind of trip and fall, right? Naturally you fell, right? But what was it, in that moment or right before that made that happen? Was there just, mental lapse or just a physical thing or whatever, like who knows? But yeah, it's
Yeah, well,
interesting to think about all these things.
it's funny, well, because when you word it like that, you'd have to break it down a little bit. Like, you naturally fell. Falling implies that something happened in the course of time. If you were fallen from the very beginning, then it would be natural for your state to be fallen. But obviously, you fell later in time, so that implies that something caused it. So it's like, and so that's the question. It's always looking deeper, and this allows us to have a huge expansion of knowledge when we look at the world through this lens of the natural and unnatural. And a lot of people who want to look at right and wrong, they might be smokers. They might be people who are completely destroying their body. People who share these ideas about freedom and against slavery. I applaud you. Thank you for helping free humankind. But are you really free yourself? And are you, it's like you can be doing the right thing through your actions to other people, but what about to yourself? Should you completely exclude yourself to that scenario? It's like the vegans who are like, well, we're not doing harm to the animals, but we're probably doing harm to the environment, but it's okay because we're not doing harm to the animals. It's like, what about to yourself? What about to the pregnant women? What about to the environment? What about to the human destiny? That requires an introspection of all the natures. But if they leave out certain parts, they say, well, let's just focus only on action. What they're doing is they're limiting nature to a select confinement, and therefore making, they're claiming that nature's authority only exists in certain scenarios, when clearly nature has always been here beyond for everything. And it must be seen as the answer for everything, which is why I say nature is the answer, because it's irrefutable. So it's like somebody saying, well, you can't apply value to something. Like, nature has no inherent value. This is what modern philosophy says. Like, people don't have inherent value. We just assume that they're value. We just assume that things have a purpose, but we can choose whatever purpose it is. Like, a hammer was obviously designed to hammer things, but they're going to say, well, you can use the hammer for this, you could use the hammer for that, you can use the hammer for that, right? So this is what philosophy does. They're trying to say, well, you can't prescribe one purpose to it. And I'm like, yeah, that's true. You can't prescribe one purpose to it. That doesn't mean that there isn't an intended purpose as to why it was created. Like, and why people tend to use hammers, or what we call a hammer, why we say it's a hammer. Otherwise, we wouldn't have a definition. What does definition mean? Clarity of meaning, right? It's like, if it's no longer a hammer because it doesn't serve its function, then it's probably something else. So that doesn't make it a hammer anymore. So, and there's people who have great videos on this, actually, online. Some people who have delved into this philosophy, and Aristotle and some of the original philosophers, like I said, delved into exactly what I'm talking about. And they are also considered some of the originators of natural law. But their view was not limited to just behavior. Their view was not limited to one thing or another. They didn't come up with a definition and say, this is what's right and this is what's wrong. But they still understood what was right and wrong. How did they know that? Because they were placing nature's authority above that of man, which is the whole premises of natural law. It's like, here's a law that's above man-made law. That's literally what it means. And so it's like, okay, what is that law? Well, I guess it's governing conditions, but everything is governed by so much. So it's like, how am I supposed to know? It's like the air we breathe and everything is governed by law. There's so many laws. It's almost like you'll find list compilations online of hundreds of natural laws. Ken Bartle has like 21 for the human body and just for consciousness alone. And it's like, really? So this tells people, if they wanted to simplify natural law, it has to be just nature. It has to be just natural authority. But the reason why nature has value is because you can't undo it. It's not something you can change. It's something that you have to live with. If you choose not to live with it, it's like, well, then you're not going to live. So you have basically no choice but to value it. And this is where I bring in that idea of synderesis, which Thomas Aquinas, one of the originators of natural law, talked about, which is our inclination to do good, or I would just say our inclination to align to nature, because we have no choice. We live in this reality. It's like, oh, I don't like nature. Nature is making me a slave. It's like, what are you supposed to do about that? Are you going to unslave yourself from nature? How are you going to do that? You're going to kill yourself? Because that's what people think nowadays, is they commit suicide, they escape from the world. That is their way of getting away from nature to the most extreme. And that's why a lot of people are doing it nowadays, because of the man-made unnatural world. And a lot of people in psychology would probably hate me saying that right now, saying that I know the cause for suicide, or I know the cause of some of this mental problems. But I can say for a fact it has to do with freedom. And for them to ignore the idea of freedom or slavery or the man-made world and its manifestations, you're ignoring something really, really large. Because purpose and value and meaning has everything to do with suicidal thoughts and thinking that you should do that such a thing to yourself. Because why should anyone even have those thoughts to begin with, is the question. Like, why? And why are we putting it in the movies as an even possibility to do, is the question. It's like, why is that even a possibility that I should choose not to breathe for myself anymore? Why is it even a possibility that I should abdicate my responsibility? To somebody with what we would call common sense, they'd be like, that's nonsense. Because everything that comes down to a learning from nature ultimately then comes down to common sense. Why? Because we do have the same senses. We're all human beings, naturally. So, common natures is essentially the same way of saying common sense. And natural natures, because if it's common and it's with everybody and everybody's in capacity to it, there we go. We just dissect it further and further. So what you have is a bunch of people who are in the capacity toward understanding nature, and therefore it's all just a matter of aggregating that. It's not that you have to, force it upon them, because obviously that's already unnatural. Again, what's natural to exist versus what's natural to use. It's like, well, no one's ever going to make themselves healthy, so I guess we have to make everybody healthy. I guess we have to make sure that everybody's eating this diet or that diet, or make sure that they're doing this drug or that drug, like whatever. It's like, more justifications for lies, which they know darn right it's like they're not supposed to, but they're justifying it because of some other natural result. And this what they call in philosophy utilitarianism, the means justifying the ends justifying the means. So some people will say natural law philosophy is based on that, and if they do, that's completely wrong. But some people, and many people throughout history, have used this. They say, well, because of this, we need to do this. And so they justify killing a bunch of people, saying, well, if we do that, then we can create this. And we see through governments, they say, well, if we can create the system of a centralized monopoly on violence, we can prevent some people from doing potential violence. So it's basically leading in the direction of the unknown. And I talk about this in this book of honesty, by the way, which is very short. I show that every time you lie, you're leading to a world of the unknown, a world that you don't know that you're living in. Because no one's being honest with each other. So how do we know the truth? We can't, because no one's ever being honest with each other. Right, so we have basically no direction. We're on a road, we lead ourselves off, and then we never go back on the road because we have no guideline, no principle, no way of leading. And because we have no authority, no natural authority. If we don't have a natural authority, we're going, ooh, we don't know where we're going. And then nature kicks us in the butt and says, get back in line. And that's what happens, And so that is history basically on repeat, and it's going to be history forever. And I'm not claiming that I have it figured out, because Socrates also
You're a prophet, man.
Socrates also said, again, one of the wisest philosophers, and I really appreciate his work and his method of bringing the truth to others as well, which is through questions alone, just questions, the Socratic method. He also said, the one thing that I know is that I know nothing. And this right here is also key, because how many natural law teachers or people who proclaim to know what's right and wrong will claim that they also know that they know nothing? Well, they're going to say, well, that's solipsism, or that's it means you can't know anything, and or nihilism, and these other ideas, and it goes back to moral relativism just because we can't.
Or New Age stuff,
right? But that's not what the quote is implying, is it? That's not what Socrates actually meant.
I've never really understood. I'm interested in this. Because what's up with
So
the gnosis of self? I mean, we can never know anything. We can't even know each other, ourselves.
yeah,
That
so
knowledge of self type of
Socrates is
thing.
not saying you can't know, because why would he say
Right.
the only good is knowledge, the only evil is ignorant, and then the next moment say, well, okay, all I know is I know nothing. He's saying that you reach a certain point of knowledge where you recognize, and you have to be humble and have some humility to recognize that you're under nature's authority, that you have to realize you don't know everything because you're not nature. And therefore, it's a constant pursuit of knowledge. It's a constant pursuit of progression. So, this goes back to what we first talked about with evolution and trying to always improve ourselves. So it doesn't mean we don't have a direction. It doesn't mean that we aren't changing. It doesn't mean that there isn't an objective blueprint for us to understand. It means that we have a sense of direction, and we get there through questions and knowledge. And when we're stuck in belief and stuck in these man-made things, we steer away from that if we don't see an underlying nature that has always existed, right? So
Yeah.
that's the point I'm getting at. And when I talked about lies leading to the world of the unknown, well, what does honesty lead to? The world of the known. And if the only good is knowledge, then the way toward the good would be being honest. And if being honest is what is right, because it's also what is truthful, because that's what it literally means to be honest, then that is the equation. And people don't define a right like that. They don't say, well, a right is what is being honest. They're going to say, oh, right is what doesn't cause harm. They give this script because Mark told them. Mark is not wrong, but it's still limited to just action. What he's actually saying, I mean, it's literally in the term natural law, it's the law of nature. It's like, if you had to say there's one law for nature, what would it be? It would have to be this very thing I'm talking about, which is that if you're not aligned to nature, you're out of line. And if you're out of line, you have no direction.
Yeah.
That's it.
And out of line with the nature within yourself. I mean, that's the first occult rule of any initiation, any ancient mystery school, whatever,
Hmm.
is you don't lie to yourself. You're honest, because when you follow the hermetic principles and all that stuff, in everything you were talking about, ties in so much with the whole law of correspondence. As above, so below, as within, as without, as the universe, so the soul. And so if we have all these people, running on, all these falsities about their worldview and even like their personal view and all this stuff, it's been perpetuated, since antiquity and all that stuff. So yeah,
Yeah. Well, think
welcome to
about
the
it,
world
right?
we live in. Yeah.
So Marx says a wrong is something that isn't isn't a right, right? I mean, a right is not a wrong. So he doesn't actually give a definition for what is right. He doesn't actually give a definition for what is good. He only gives a definition for what is evil and says good is the opposite of evil. Now I'm coming at it from the point of view where you can define both, where you can both define good and evil. And the reason why is because if you're leaving people alone, in this case, right, where a right does not cause harm, what you're doing is you're allowing their nature to express. You're basically supporting or giving to their nature rather than taking away. It's the only other option. If you're not stealing from someone, you're giving to them. That's it. And that's the thing. It's like, well, how could you give without taking? Well, you can take without stealing. This is what I'm saying.
Good vibes, man. I'll give it to you all day.
You can take without stealing. Right?
Yeah.
So this is what I'm saying. And it's like,
We
well, how
pay
do you...
attention, man. I'm giving you my time, aren't I?
Yeah, and you're
Right,
doing
those are
so
examples.
voluntarily. I'm not stealing it. So, but that's the thing. It's like, well, if we're taking from nature, are we stealing it? It's like, no, nature gave us these resources. Nature gave us the ability to do all of these things. We're stealing from each other in the case of an interaction between two people, which is why we like to limit natural law to just action. But it's not just limited there, because we can steal from nature too. If we steal something that isn't supposed to be stolen from, like that's the whole point. It's like, where are we taking from? Taking is the action, actually, and stealing is one form of the action of stealing. So, stealing is one form of the action of taking. So it becomes stealing if I take something which I'm not supposed to take. But it's not stealing if I take something that I am supposed to take. You understand? So it's a matter of time and place. Do I understand the place, my place, and the place of the things that I I take with my time. So, and this is why we say take your time. This is why we say everything has a time and place, and we say, you'll find your place through time. Why time is the mechanism to why we learn all truths, like, time tells all truth, or time heals all wounds, people will say. All these phrases can be connected to the philosophy that I created for this reason, because it's very simple for the purpose of understanding nature in the greatest sense. And again, it's not beholden to this one philosophy. The philosophy is literally just to say that no one philosophy has it all figured out, or that one way of thinking has it all figured out, because you have to respect the nature which has everything there for us to figure out in the first place. And if without the ability
to it all, sorry.
Yeah, and without the ability to have philosophy, the ability to express ourselves, we don't have any philosophy. We don't have any knowledge to begin with. That stems from our nature.
Yeah, and this whole process, we're all trying to learn together, right? Well, we'd like to think so, but as far as how we envision the new, I wouldn't say, no, I'm not going to say the new earth or the new humanity treading on any kind of new age implications that people might have heard and this and that, and like, how do people actually envision that? How do they see that? I'm switching up the framework or the lingua a little bit more, and like what's up with like a hermetically sealed society and that kind of stuff, and
Yeah.
people really just understanding like their true harmony within themselves and keeping that balance and keeping that science of life in the focus of their mind all the time. And that's just like that interaction within themselves, that it just encourages that greater expression, and you hold people large, and you see that soul spark within. You could see that through anyone, and you try to find more common ground than the opposite of that, right?
Yeah.
We're looking to relate with our truthful our natural nature of
in which everything comes from
you
nature.
said it better than me, man. Yeah.
Well, since everything comes from nature, and what you just said, what does it mean? It means that you can learn from everything. It doesn't matter what it is. Even the worst of people, even the worst of ideas, it doesn't matter. It exists for a reason. Unicorns, zombies, all these ideas exist for a reason. That's it. So therefore, there's something to learn from everything in creation. So if somebody says something, they're like, "Oh, I don't like this because it's the occult. I don't like this because it's this. I don't like it." Guess what? You're not willing to learn. If you're willing to learn, you'd say, "Okay, I accept all of it because it all is here within this reality." And that's what the Tao Te Ching says. It says, "Accept everything." But yet, it says the way of nature. So why would the way of nature include accepting the things that are unnatural? It's because, again, nature heals itself when you start to accept its existence. So
it's also doing shadow work, making the darkness conscious and shining the light on, what all those obscurities of what's going on, and just trying to understand the disharmony of things as well. Like, well, I can't look at that because it's evil or bad or a conspiracy or whatever. You know what I mean? So
yeah.
When all things are considered, where do we stand, my man?
Where do we stand? Is that a question? Where do we stand?
More of a phrase, but
we stand on our own feet, obviously, but
are we standing on eternal principles of truth and all that good stuff? Hermetically sealed shit,
Yeah, I mean that's. But again, like hermetic. Hermetic, if you break down the term, principles, truth, they're all just meaning the one word, nature. Like, if people were to simplify things down to just nature, it would make life so much easier, but instead we create like a billion words to represent the same thing. And this is what I'm saying. But,
and then we totally distorted what, the true meaning of the word nature means, because how is it used in marketing, and how is it used, all this stuff? Right?
Oh, yeah. Well, so marketing is funny, right? So obviously they'll put on boxes like, this is natural, this is more natural, this is 100% natural,
made with natural ingredients, right?
Yeah. So, and I have chapters in my books about this. My second book, Sapientia Naturae, which is where this whole philosophy is based on. Okay, and then the 10-hour presentation goes into examples like glasses and everything you can think of. People say, "Oh, well, this is natural because it," it's like they'll come up with all sorts of things. It's funny.
Oh, I'm sorry, I slept on that presentation, man. Shit. Like I said, you got so much stuff going on. I'm like,
It's huge, Derek. Not
wow,
many
yeah,
people
yeah.
know about this in our community.
Mm.
Very few people, right? And
Oh
obviously, I'm
man.
trying to revive a lot of old philosophy and things that are, for the most part, semantics. But it does help us increase our perspective,
I feel you, brother.
because people are going to get stuck in semantics when it comes to natural law if they're not able
Yeah.
to see other ways of interpreting it. So, for example, when someone says, "Hey, I'm going to tell you the definition of natural law. It's universal, governing, binding principles that are immutable and have always existed." It's like, okay, you're going to overwhelm someone, and where they currently are, they probably have a sense of understanding nature. So why don't you build on that? You know, and that's the thing. I asked you, what is nature? And if you ask the average person, like, what is nature? They're going to say, well, it's something that, is here and it's something that is beyond the man-made. Like, they're going to know because they're not stupid. And the
Yeah.
thing is, people are not stupid. They're simply led into ignorance by their own deceit and by their own wordplay and by our own problems. But therefore, if we create the problems, we can also create the solutions. If we build all these problems, we can easily tear it down. But that's where abolitionism comes in. So,
Mhm.
what was I talking about? With ingredients and stuff like that. So when you go to the supermarket, you see something that says natural, right? Obviously it's on the box. It doesn't actually represent what is actually in the thing, and you'd have to break it down step by step. Okay, first of all, it's in a packaged box. It's in a grocery store. I mean, already you have some complications. Then you have the ingredients itself, which are separate, and then of course you have to combine them together, which creates a new nature, right? So it's like, oh well, this is Ritz crackers. It's like, okay, what's a rich cracker in nature? To nature, a rich cracker is just a man-made manifestation of a bunch of natural things brought together and twisted in a billion different ways to turn into a rich cracker, right? So,
Extra
obviously,
selfie.
they're going to say it's 100% natural because it has wheat, or it has 100% of one type of ingredient, or it's all natural ingredients. What they mean by natural is the FDA definition of it's not synthetic, or it's not containing artificial ingredients. And what they mean by artificial is it's not based on petroleum and all, like, specific things which don't have anything to do with this philosophy of understanding what is natural and unnatural. So it's like, okay, wheat. What started us on wheat? It comes from the grass family. Our human being is supposed to be eating grass, and so it's like this is where we can get into the nature as to, when did agriculture start? Well, it started with the foundation of governments, and that also started when the soil started to deplete. Like, when we started to do mass agriculture, which this is why you have anarcho-primitivists out there, because they believe that it's with the foundation of governments, you had the foundation of agriculture, and that led to the population decline. Even though people think that it led to population increase, it led to our mentality and our ways of thinking, our nutrition quality reduced. Because we're over farming and we're using a lot of agriculture. So again,
Especially monoculture.
I can support anarcho-primitivism, anarcho-pacifism, all these different forms if you just understand their truth. Because again, I told you, you can learn from truth and everything. So, for these capitalists to just look at their own view is like just hypocrisy, according to what their own principles would even say. So, but that's if you were to really break things down. So if you were to look at these food, right? You look at these different food items. You would say, okay, well, let's say we're looking at Ritz crackers. I'm just gonna throw that out there, even though I've
Getting
never
on the Ritz,
consumed them for
man. Get
years.
'em.
Yeah, isn't there a song like "Getting on the Ritz" or something like that?
You know it.
Okay, we got ingredients, right? These ingredients are probably processed in a lab. You got packaging, you got the consumer-based demand for it, and all this stuff. Where it's like, okay, interesting. What about just going to the farmer's market and buying something, that somebody grew? It's obviously more natural because it went through a lot less processes. It's something that has always existed, like people trading with each other and growing these foods. Ritz crackers is probably much more newer than somebody trading an apple on a farm. You know what I mean? So it is the matter of time. Again, time tells all the truth. And so so when people look at something in the store, ask themselves that simple question: has this always existed? If you look at an avocado, a banana, or a piece of green, and then you compare it to the cereal box, it's like, yeah, that's probably more natural. Okay, it's very obvious. Now, some things are probably not going to be so obvious. This cereal versus that cereal. Okay, one claims to be 100% natural, the other one claims to be 100% natural, but one of them is made of, let's say, rye wheat, and the other one is made of, I don't know, a different type of wheat. And it's like, okay, which wheat has always existed, and,
They
and
might have
how,
taken the wheat germ out of it too,
yeah, and not only that, if it's natural to exist, that's separate from if it's natural to use. Your own body, your own chemistry, and how you digest food is a separate nature. So what you would have to do is look at the nature of the item and the nature of all the natures that consist of that nature, in addition to the nature of the environment, which, again, this is like germ theory versus terrain theory, and people fight about that all day. Again, it's like
Ah,
it's all part of the same nature, like in the same reality. So the thing is, again, now we have our body. So our body in relation to the world and to relation to these things. These are all separate natures. You see how this becomes a complex science, because what you would have to do is you would have to look at each single one. And it sounds to a lot of people like it's hard. It's like, yeah, how am I supposed to be in control of all this? Like a banana is something that, if you look back and you look at the history of bananas, they don't look the same now as they did back then. They look totally different. Watermelons, the same thing. Watermelons used to be all seeds, apparently, right? And I can't verify this, but we can tell over time through our agriculture and growing foods that the food has changed and it's gotten bigger.
hybridization and all that
Yeah,
stuff.
no
We got
more
seedless
seeds.
stuff. Hey.
Yeah, and now it's all water and it's all sugar and it's all fiber. And then they say, whoa, it's all...
Recording has stopped.
But then, it's fine. But then they say, well, there's no nutrition anymore. Because it's it's all sugar and it's all water, but it's like, okay, but there's no nutrition anymore. But back then, was it edible? Even if it had nutrition, doesn't mean it was edible. Like, so because you made it edible over time by your cultivation, of course that's going to reduce the nutrients, because now you're turning it into a bunch of things, but that's going to come at the expense. Like, so basically by making it edible, you basically reduce the nutrition over time. People can't perceive this, but this is all questions. This is all the matter of inquiry into the nature of the universe. It's like, if I look at a wild berry in nature and I compare that to a berry that we get in the superstore, totally different, two different things. The wild berries are very small and tiny, and they have a lot more skin, a lot less flesh. The store-bought ones, a lot more flesh and a lot less skin, and we actually consider the skin to be the most nutritious part of the berry sometimes.
And people were taught to like take the skin off of some of these things, fruits and vegetables.
And then they're told to cook it too. Like let's heat it up, destroy all the enzymes, destroy all the nutrients, and now you're changing it too. And what do they call that? They actually literally call cooking denaturing. They say it's denaturing the proteins. They call it adulteration. They call it all a bunch of different terms to literally say in its terminology that you're changing it from its natural form. So it's like, if people say, oh, I love nature, I want to return to nature, and yet they're cooking everything that they buy, and they're afraid of every little germ in the world. It's like, are you really? So, we're all prone. We're all prone to fulfilling some aspects of our life that are unnatural. But when we recognize that, then we become more conscious. We apply more knowledge to our nature. Our nature can now align more to nature, right? Because...
yeah, man.
And keep in mind, every time I say the word nature, I'm always implying there's underlying natures with an S inside. So, there's the lungs, there's the heart, there's all these parts inside my nature, and then those have natures of their own, and you just go deeper and deeper and deeper, right?
Yeah. Yeah, totally. And I don't know if you read that essay. It's called The Law of Assimilation. And just going from the main source of where all the energy on earth really gets it from, as far as outside of the elements, we're looking at the sun, and then you bring it down to all the mineral elements, and further dense we go and all that stuff. And we kind of see that within ourselves and our connection to source, and our source, and our harmony, balance, if you will, and the intake of things that are denaturing us, and how, if we're not doing that, if we're not avoiding that, or at least doing it in moderation, you know what I mean, then we're gonna fall to illness and all this stuff. We become deharmonized. We're lying to ourselves too much and too often, if you will.
So people will buy the product that says natural, taking for granted, thinking, oh, well, it is more natural, but they may not actually know. And that's the thing. They can get deceived by marketing.
Oh, yeah.
But it's possible that they come to understand more as to, maybe they know the source of the food. Maybe they know who made the food. Maybe they know all that stuff. And that's going to verify more as to, okay, I understand it. And because I know it, I have more knowledge of nature. And therefore, you have an understanding of nature. So like when we use this term nature, I use it in the sense of it has to be knowledgeable, because otherwise you don't have nature. I have a phrase for Naturosophy. The main phrase is, nature is good insofar as it is known. That's the main phrase of the philosophy,
I
because
like
you
that.
don't have existence or knowledge or even our very being, our essence, without wisdom, because it's in our being to have wisdom. The word Homo sapien literally means man wise, man with wisdom. So if you want to be born again, as a lot of these Christians or religious people would say, probably should start with knowledge, because knowledge is your way to wisdom, and it's your way to being born again, because nature literally means birth, as another definition. And if you go to gene, it also means to be born. So our genes, being born, and our genes also
Mm.
represent the word nature as well. This is
Yeah,
something I all go into the presentation, and I also break down separately what is natural learning, natural professions, natural currency, all these things. Because if you look at just simple words, religion, if it comes from the word religare or religio, it's like to bind or hold back, or to bring together, two different definitions. But it's like then you look at the religions nowadays, and they add buildings to it, they add titles, they add a bunch of things that were not originally of that word, but they mix the word with all these other things. They're basically mixing the nature of something with a bunch of lies or assumptions, essentially, to it. And
and
so,
interesting hats too.
like government itself as well, right? Like the word could just mean guiding someone else. It could just be leading someone. If we were to be very nice about the term,
Yeah.
um, but if we can take that and say, well, what if we should dictate and do this with violence and create these titles and create these positions? It's like you basically took a term and threw it like into a pile of a bunch of other terms, and it turns into where government is no longer just guiding someone. It turns into a system of this and this ideology and this building and this person. It's like, okay, and now we have to learn, coming into this new world as natural human beings. We're like, what is this stuff? And then you can't blame a child for being confused about currency or any man-made thing, because it's not the
They're
natural
mentions.
condition. They want to explore, they want to have fun in the forest, and meanwhile, our man-made world is forcing them to learn all these new things, which they don't actually have to learn. We think they have to learn it. We think that they're obliged to learn the stuff because we think that these man-made things are natural. So we deceive
Programmed.
ourselves. But that's what it means to want to program, is to want to be the man-made authority and thus disregard or ignore the natural authority. And so
Oh,
if you were to embrace nature, that is the same thing as creating knowledge for nature. I have charts for all this stuff. Um,
wow, that's awesome.
you can't know something unless you embrace it. It's like you have a shadow or some sort of trauma you have to face. You're not going to really understand your trauma unless you embrace it, like face it face to face. And it's
Right.
hard to do that, but doing that is the way to learning about it and therefore overcoming it, to realize you're more than that. It's like you're a
Hell yeah.
diabetic. It's like, no, you're not diabetic. You're a human being saying you have diabetes, this condition, which you recognize is not natural because you're just a human being. So
Mm-hmm.
therefore, build upon that. Build upon what you know to be natural and take away what you know is unnatural. With
Yeah.
what? Adding in the natural, because that's the only way you get rid of the unnatural. It's something that doesn't create anything new.
Yeah. Yeah. And yeah, people want to attach like I am a diabetic. Well, we got to remove the I am from all these things, and especially if there are any kind of symptoms and things. And yeah, it's just really
It's a lie.
interesting how that mindset can just shift someone's personality and behaviors and this and that, and it leads them away from the harmony of their true nature, natural law, and all that. Yeah,
Yeah, so now you see, hopefully, and people who watch this understand where I'm coming from with this and why I don't have to teach natural law the way Mark does anymore, because I
yeah.
really understand a more holistic worldview, which again he still verifies. All his knowledge is not wrong according to this worldview. This is simply expanding upon it to say this is what he's actually really pointing to. And he knows this. Like, he, in his seminars, you'll watch his seminars, he'll say it's all about the natural versus the artificial. And in some of his podcasts, he straight up says, everything I do is about differentiating the natural versus the unnatural. Like, he straight up
Mm,
says it. And so it's like
Mm.
everything he does, it is, because natural law isn't just about action. It isn't just about, two people in the world and having to figure out their own body politics and all this stuff. It's like it's so limited. It's not what we're looking at. If we're looking about the occult and laws, this governs everything. And so that's why I want to make it to everything. But if you're going to talk about everything, then you're going to find out nature is the answer one way or another. You're going to have to be looking at it through the lens of the natural and unnatural. As far as I'm concerned, I can't find a classification system broader than that.
Hmm. Yeah, yeah, interesting. And I always like the term just the science of life, because
Mm.
like it is what it is, and it is gonna be your life. Always on this quest of knowing. That's what science is. Sciere, to know, right?
Mm. Right.
So yeah, from Latin, and yeah, just yeah, but
I would recommend, if somebody is a little confused by a lot of what I said, they look at my book on honesty. Only because if you look
oh,
at everything I said through the lens of just honesty, you can probably understand it a lot better. It's
mm,
a very simple principle. One, it's like, just be honest. But it sounds hard because in your head you're going to say, well, what about this and what about that? Could I lie here? Could I lie there? Or, it's like, and so that's where it's like you have to acquire more knowledge for yourself. And this book really puts in perspective, I think, for everything we talked about.
wow, Corey, yeah, that's excellent. Killing it. You are on fire, buddy. Holy smokes.
Yeah, and there's my guidebook as well, the Sapientia Naturae guidebook, which is bigger than the original book, which has about 200 pages. This one has a little bit more, over 200 pages. It's going to be based on the Socratic curriculum, like the Socratic method, purely. You're talking the whole
Hmm,
book is basically questions. So if you want 200 pages of
wow.
questions because you really want to learn, or you want to use it for a classroom setting, this is how you do it.
That's a great idea. And like for people that are looking to like homeschool their kids, or, that kind of stuff, looking for alternative things, looking to re-educate themselves or whatever, like that sounds like a really great book,
Every thought is a
at
question.
at any kind of level for anyone. So yeah.
Every thought is a
You,
question.
mm, is it?
If you were willing to expand upon your thoughts all the time
Yeah,
and
yeah.
always improve upon your knowledge, then every thought is a question. And if you're saying, well, my thoughts are not truth, but they are trying to find the truth, then it's a question. And if you are trying to improve your life, you'd be asking yourself questions. If you want to improve someone else's life, you would have to do the same thing. You might want to jump at them saying, well, you need to know about this, you need to know about that. But guess what? There's a reason why Larkin Rose's candle in the dark method works, because
Mm,
questions is the way we inquire truth for ourselves, and thus it is also the way we share it with others. If we want people to be honest, we don't have to tell them and yell at them what our honest feelings are about them. We can ask them questions, and they will know what is the honest truth themselves, and you will also learn more about them, honestly.
yeah, and you're not talking about questions like why it being an asshole.
Hmm.
We're talking more like the apophatic inquiries, n'est-ce pas?
Yeah, so
Excuse my French, but
apophatic.
yeah.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, so knowing what is from what is not. I mean, it's all tying into what we're talking about. Obviously, the whole
Oh yeah,
idea
man.
of, again, I think you can still define what is right and what is good, separate from what is evil. But that's because you are technically so. But yeah, so it's I can word this 100 billion different ways, which is why I haven't done many interviews on this topic. I mean, most people want to talk to me about slavery or these other things I talk about because
Yeah.
it is facing us in the real world of problems. But beyond this, if we're really going to evolve on a spiritual evolution, these are the ideas I would talk about.
Yeah, and it's solution based oriented, right? And it ties in with the whole, solutions to end slavery, right?
Mhm.
And that's fantastic, man. I love it.
Yeah. Yeah. So this is just, again, for people who are teachers of natural law, or people who understand that perspective, or not at all, and they want a simplification or bigger worldview. So both, not just a simpler but a more complex worldview. And that's how nature is. It's like it's simple and it's also complex depending on how you take it. I have a whole chapter on that too. So.
Mm. Yeah, yeah. Take it as a grain of nature, sand, a seed, whatever. That is true indeed. Wow, Corey, thank you so much for you blew me away. Just
Well, if you have
I
any
don't know where you're
questions,
gonna
feel
go with
free.
it. Everything. It's like,
But yeah,
yeah, fuck yeah,
it's a tough one to talk about.
rock that.
That's why I have it written in book format and in presentation format.
Wow, yeah, I'd love to get one of those books,
But
or
I
all of
am
them.
definitely
Hell yeah.
complexifying it because I'm a teacher coming from that. But like you can easily simplify it through the lens of honesty or through the lens of looking at what has always existed and the terms I use, naturalizing and denaturing. Like if you just stuck with the basics like people do with Mark's work, it's easy to show. But if you were to go deeper into it, it's like it becomes where it's like, oh gosh, that it goes for any philosophy, any philosophy that cares about knowledge that doesn't claim to know everything, which is what philosophy is supposed to do, by the way. So
Yeah, not trying to be getting all this knowledge for the wrong reasons and whatever, and gotten their hubris or narcissistic ways of interacting. That ain't in line with their own laws of nature within themselves. What's the deal with that reality? It ain't quite the naturality that we should be having, see? But anyways.
Beautiful, man. All right. Is there anything else that you want to talk about, man?
No, I think this will be wrapped up short and sweet. Yeah, really just I wanted to touch on a lot of stuff. I'm just digesting it nice and slow, and yeah, I'd love to have you on maybe another time to follow up, see where you're at, and
Okay.
how much more you've expanded since, or whatever's good.
Okay. Yeah. So
You got a lot of great innovative thoughts on so many things. It's yeah.
I'll end the
I've been
recording.
asking, like, where are the new, Einsteins or Nikola Teslas, not the musky version, whatever the fuck, right? Like people, the Renaissance, man, like you are fucking, like, you're hitting the nail pretty hard, man. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a different worldview for sure. But yeah, but yeah, thank you. I'll end the recording, right? So, then I think that's a good way to conclude it.
Cool, yeah.
Yeah, is that good?
If we are able to do that which is right, we realize that all the benevolencies of life come from a power beyond ourselves. The fruit on our trees, the grass that grows under our feet, everything that we have belongs to a natural law, a natural procedure in space. We can benefit from it. We can be wonderful gardeners in the garden that has been given to us. But when we subdivide it and sell it off, we're in trouble. This world is a world ruled by one divine plan. All of the actions of the individual are subject to laws of cause and effect. And there is nothing that we do that doesn't cause something. And if anything that causes something will have its effect. The main thing is that nature, in its own form, and as we received it in the beginning, is pleasant, right, purposeful, and according to the will of heaven and earth. Nature is forever a friend. It is always the source of growth and progress, and it is also an endless cause of beauty. But when we begin to misuse nature, then it gradually turns into a monster of unruly and horrible proportions. Nature abused becomes a source of tragedy for all concerned. We have made no attempt to recognize that these difficulties lie in an invisible ring that our physical perceptions cannot see. If we could see that the natural corruption and disruption that we are causing, we would probably do something about it. perfectly proper to consider the fact that the person who is right will be happy. Now, to do that, he must cleanse his mind and his life from the causes of unhappiness, and must get rid of the belief that his errors are the source of his happiness. He must begin to think back with nature into the rulerships of the various powers of existence.